Hi, everyone. We are the hosts of Like Mother, Like Murder, a true crime momcast.
You heard that right. We are a momcast, which is our unique twist in the true crime world.
What sets us aside is that our content is mainly mom-related, from missing moms to murdered moms.
To moms who committed the crime, survivors, and more.
We are getting started on our third season with over 100 episodes that you guys can go and binge. Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Heather. We drop new episodes every Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother,
Like Murder.
All episodes of A Trial by Podcast are for informational and entertainment purposes only. Much to their parents' dismay, neither host is a lawyer, journalist, or investigator. Just two people with microphones and Wi-Fi. All actions discussed are alleged, and all parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. For the full legal mumbo-jumbo, check the show notes.
I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Emily.
And today I am going to tell you the story of the murder of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey.
That's nice, Stan.
Guys, we're doing it. We are covering JonBenét Ramsey. I'm scared.
I'm excited. This is one of my favorite cases.
People get really fired up about JonBenét.
Because there's so many,
as they should.
Yeah.
But I'm a little bit nervous. Now, I have so many I got some biz nasty to cover. So if you hate the biz nasty section, I'm really sorry. I'm going to try and keep it as quick as possible.
Speed round of biz nasty.
First things first, we are currently doing an Instagram giveaway. So if you do not follow us on Instagram, you want to go follow us because the giveaway is fun stuff.
It's the tits.
It's going to run all through December, so you can enter until December 31st. And what we are giving away is a trial by podcast baseball cap, a mug, like a custom mug. It has like our podcast like image that you see when the podcast is playing of the girl with the headphones and everything on one side, and then on the other side it says "Huzzah, motherfucker" with some like sparkles, which is cute. And then there's also a tote bag that says "Have the day you deserve." Then there's a murder mystery dinner game. Like it's a whole kit that like comes with everything you need. It assigns like different roles and stuff like that.
That looks fun as fuck, dude.
I
I
know.
want to play that game. I want to win this.
I originally got it because I was like, I wanted to have a murder mystery dinner party.
Uh-huh.
And then I was literally like, I will never have time for this. And now I sound like I'm just now I sound like I'm re-gifting it. But honestly, it's going to be, I didn't even open it. Like the plastic is still on it.
Somebody else can enjoy it.
But I was like, this is perfect for an Instagram giveaway. So that's kind of like how it started. Is I was like, well, if I'm not going to use this, I should give this to a listener. And then I was like, we should do a whole giveaway thing. So I hope you guys have fun with it, whoever wins it. And then there's also a bunch of party decorations that I got to go with it. So you can have like a whole dinner party with it with your friends. And then lastly, there are some open ear headphones for listening to our podcast. And you better not listen to any other podcast with them. That would be
ours
treacherous.
only.
Yes. So, if you skipped all the Instagram giveaway stuff, you want to stop here and listen to this because this is all related to today's episode. So first of all, we are recording in a new location. We have moved everything to Emily's house, and we love Emily's house, but it is a 100-year-old building. So the floor creaks a little bit. I don't think you'll hear it. I really don't, because you couldn't hear my nephew screaming at our where we used to record. So I don't think you'll hear the floor.
Oh, and then while it gets up, we'll see.
You will probably hear Miss Molly Malls, Emily's dog. Now, if this is your first episode listening, we have like pretty good audio quality, I think.
Yeah.
So if
After
we're a
we
little
spent
bit,
how many hours putting fucking soundproofing panels?
I don't even want to talk about it.
walls?
But like it might be a little bit echoey. We've like tested it. I don't think it is. We are going to soundproof it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But just know, if you've never listened to us before, the audio, we are going to soundproof this room a little bit more. So if it's not perfect, I'm sorry.
We'll do
But
better.
we had to record.
We'll do better.
It'll be better in the future, but I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And if it's not perfect, don't tell me, because if it's not good, I've already cried about it
Can't do
before
anything about
releasing
it.
this episode.
Can't do anything about it. So moving on.
Now, this is a disclaimer about this episode, and I'm going to cut this in too, because this is going to be a multi-parter. I have no idea how many parts. We're just going to go for it. Disclaimer. I do not know who killed JonBenét Ramsey, okay? I'm not a psychic. I'm not a detective. We're just people who are interested in this stuff. We want to talk about it. We know you guys do too. I know some of you guys might not, you're sick of hearing about this case, but a little girl was murdered here, and she does deserve the attention. I wish every case could get the amount of attention that hers has.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're not professionals. And the thing with this case is there is so much conflicting evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'll read in one report, the lights were off. And then in the next report, you're like, the lights were on. And you have to go through and discern, what are the facts here? And I have done that to the absolute best of my abilities, but I'm sure it's not perfect. Because there's so many sources on this. There's so much. I've never seen a case with so much information out there. So I want you to know I did my absolute best. But like our podcast, this really, when it comes down to its core, while I always want to do a good job and like help people, this is an entertainment podcast. I'm not a news, a news station or anything like that. So I have done my absolute best, but there is no way that I will touch on every single point that has ever been reported on. This will not be, a conclusive, even though it's going to be a few episodes, I feel like I would need 25 episodes to like go through every single little piece. But I tried to touch on everything at least a little bit, anything I could find. But what I will say is if you guys are like, oh my God, you missed this one big thing, or I have this question, or this didn't make sense to me, or I heard this differently, what I'm going to ask you guys to do, email us questions, comments, whatever about this case to atrialbypodcast@gmail.com. Please email them. It just makes it so much easier than if you DM us. And if we get a ton of those, we'll do a follow-up episode and we'll like go through some of the questions and comments and whatever, and we'll shout you guys out if you want to be shouted out. Just be kind. Send it in an email, atrialbypodcast@gmail.com. And, I'm not going to do it if we get 5, but if we get a ton of, questions and comments, then we'll do a follow-up. Like, it'll be a bonus episode. So it won't like take place of another normal Tuesday episode. So with that being said, I think it's time, 10 minutes and 41 seconds in, to get into the story.
Not bad.
Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this case, which I don't know if you exist, but if you do, I do want to give a brief overview of the story to start, as we are going to be diving very deep into the details, like pretty much from the beginning to the end, just because there's so much information. It was so hard to organize it. We're going to like talk about something, and then we're going to move on for 20 minutes, and then we're going to come back to it. And so I don't want you guys to be confused. So here's a quick overview. So JonBenét Ramsey was a 6-year-old who was murdered in her home in Boulder, Colorado on Christmas night, 1996. The next morning, her family awoke to find that JonBenét was missing. So they wake up, they think everything's normal. The mom comes down the stairs and she finds a 3-page ransom note, which we will talk about in depth. She calls the police. She's like, hey, my daughter's missing. And the police arrive at the house around 6 a.m. Now, multiple searches of the house were done. However, it wasn't until the early afternoon that JonBenét's body was actually discovered in the family's basement. So she was still in the house the whole time. And the case remains unsolved to this day. So again, I know everybody probably knows all of this, but there are 2 main camps of theorists. There are those that believe that the family was involved, and there are those that believe that they had nothing to do with it and it was some sort of intruder, whether that was a stranger or someone who knew the family, whatever it may be. So we will go over an array of theories and suspects. However, I ask that everyone keeps in mind I probably won't touch on every single one. I'm going to touch on a lot of them, a lot more than in the documentary that just came out. I feel like they gave you like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
We're going to do, I don't know how many, like maybe 10.
So how many, wait, did you say how many pages this is officially now?
I feel like I want to tell them, but I don't want you to know because you're going to, we're at 48. And that's without the sources. I put the sources in a separate document. So usually when I tell Emily a page count, it includes like a page of sources.
So there's like about 50
So I don't know. This might be, if it ends up being more than 3 parts, I'll probably just drop the last part as a bonus episode. I don't know for sure, but I really don't want it to take up like a whole 4 weeks. I feel like that's crazy. I feel like
or we
3
do
is
2
crazy.
bonus episodes. If it's like 4,
I don't know.
then we post the first one and then a bonus second episode.
It just
and
depends
then the
on
third and
how
fourth.
much I can catch up because I'm stressed and I feel like we're behind. And yeah, so it depends. So don't be mad at me if it's 3 weeks worth of stuff, but I won't make it more than 3. I promise that. So really the question here, besides what happened to JonBenét and who did this to her, like the main question that people are always arguing about is, was the Ramsey family responsible for what happened to JonBenét? Now, like I said, I have no fucking idea, but this is a trial by podcast. So I'm going to give you all of the details that I can without having a mental breakdown, and then I'll let you be the judge.
It's a good sentence.
Thank you. In the heart of Boulder, Colorado, a picturesque city nestled against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, the Ramsey family represented a portrait of success and affluence. The family consisted of John Ramsey, a successful businessman, his wife Patricia, also known as Patsy Ramsey, who was a former beauty queen, and their 2 children, Burke and JonBenét. Now, JonBenét Ramsey, named after his father, was a native of Lincoln, Nebraska. He had served as a naval officer before embarking on a successful career in the computer industry. And by the 1990s, John was actually the president of a software company called Access Graphics, which was a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. Now, Lockheed Martin had recently reached $1 billion in revenue. And John's career success had afforded the Ramseys a lifestyle of privilege and comfort. They chartered 2 private jets, and they had a vacation home in Michigan in addition to their home in Colorado. In 1999, their net worth was reported to be about $6.4 million, which is equal to about $12 million today. In the Netflix documentary that came out in 2024, John basically touches on this. I don't know if it was the Netflix documentary or the Crime Junkie coverage, but he's like, yeah, everyone thinks I was a billionaire. Like, I wasn't a billionaire. My company made $1 billion and whatever, which, I mean, they were obviously still very wealthy, but I do feel like there's a difference between being a billionaire and having, the value of $12 million today,
Yeah.
Now, Patsy Ramsey, who was born Patricia Ann Paw, was from West Virginia, and she had a background in pageantry. She was crowned Miss West Virginia in 1977, and she carried the grace and the poise of her pageant days into her role as a mother and a bolder socialite. Her involvement in the community and her children's lives was marked by a blend of Southern charm and flair for the dramatic. When they met, John was 35 and Patsy was only 23. Now, John was divorced, and his downstairs neighbors, like after his divorce, were actually friends of Patsy's from West Virginia, and they were the ones that introduced the 2. So the couple, like I said, they had 2 children together. They had Burke, who was born in 1987, and JonBenét, who was born in 1990. But John also had children from a previous marriage. Now, at the time of the crime, which happened in 1996, Burke was 9 and JonBenét was 6. JonBenét, with her bright blonde hair and her lively little personality, followed in her mother's footsteps, participating in child beauty pageants. She was known for her sparkling costumes, confident performances, and the numerous titles she won, including Little Miss Colorado and National Tiny Miss Beauty. So like I said, in addition to JonBenét and Burke, John had 3 children from a previous marriage. He had 1 son and 2 daughters. But tragically, his daughter Elizabeth, who went by Beth, had died in a car accident in 1992. Now, the two other children, we're not going to talk about them very much because they did not live with John and Patsy at the time of the crime. So at the time, in Boulder, it's just John, Patsy, Burke, and JonBenét. So the Ramseys lived in a Tudor-style home at 755 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado. Now, I've actually been to this house, not inside, obviously, or on the property because I'm not a creep, but I did drive by it on the way to a hike in Boulder one time because I was like, I got to see this.
Same. Boulder's one of my favorite places in the whole world.
And the house is weird because when I had heard this case so many times, you're like picturing this mansion, but like from the front of the house, like it doesn't look that big. Like it looks decently sized, like big, but not like this massive mansion.
Yeah.
And it just must like go back really far from the street or something. I don't know. Now, the Ramsey home was a hub of activity, often hosting gatherings for friends and family. It was decorated with care and reflected Patsy's attention to detail and her love for the arts.
Me.
Yeah, literally. Literally, Emily. Now, JonBenét's participation in pageants was a significant aspect not only of her life, but the family's life in general. These events were glamorous affairs where JonBenét was often dressed in elaborate costumes and makeup. She would sing and dance and charm the judges. And anyone that has like had a child in, any major competitive sport or anything, like, this isn't just like, Tuesday nights we do this thing. It's like,
it's like a full-time job.
Right. Like you're spending a whole weekend doing it. And then you're like spending so much time preparing and all of this stuff. So Patsy, who would draw on her own pageant experience, was obviously deeply involved in preparing JonBenét for these competitions. She would choreograph the routines and like select the outfits, and like these outfits were like custom made for her. You can't just like go buy them at a store.
Bougie.
Now, while some in the community admired JonBenét's poise and talent, others often raised eyebrows at the nature of child pageantry, questioning the implications of such exposure and attention on a young child. Now, I don't want to dive too deep into this because if you know the JonBenét case, like we've all heard this discussion a million times before. This is what I will say. If you watch the videos, do I think her parents were sexualizing her? And I'm just giving you my opinion. No, I don't think they were. But I think some creeps watching that stuff were sexualizing her, if you get what I'm saying. So, like, were they doing something wrong? No, I think their intentions were good. Was it a little bit naive? Personally, I think so. No hate to anyone who puts their children in pageants and whatever, but I think it's just like a fact to be aware of that just because you don't see, like, you would let your kid go swimming in a swimsuit. To you, that's not it. You're not sexualizing your kid, but you have to understand that when the wrong person sees them in a swimsuit, they are being sexualized by that person.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just my opinion, and we've all heard this conversation 100 times, so I don't want to go into it too deep. Now, there's other like things that people like to harp on when it comes to the pageants. One is that JonBenét's hair was actually chemically lightened. So her hair was bleached. It was bleached blonde. It was not naturally blonde. And during the pageants, she would wear these things called flippers, which were basically like fake little teeth to fill in any missing teeth that the young like pageant girls might have had.
I made that out of wet paper towels when I was little because I had a massive gap in between my front teeth.
Aw.
So I put little wet paper towels in it to make my teeth look white and straight.
Cute.
It was weird.
But this is like one of those things that a lot of people point to as like they were trying to make her look like an adult.
Like older than she was, yeah.
They're like, they're bleaching the hair. They're, normally you see a kid with missing teeth and you're like, how cute. Like, your teeth are missing because they're a kid. And so whatever. Again, I don't, unless the parents did do this and it is some weird thing, like, I'm assuming that if they had nothing to do with what happened to JonBenét, then this was innocent. Putting her in these pageants was innocent, and naive in a way. Now, despite the occasional criticism, the Ramseys appeared to be a very close-knit family. They were involved in their community, and they were kind of just enjoying the fruits of John's labor. But unfortunately, this family's seemingly perfect world was about to be shattered, propelling them into a nightmare that would capture the nation's attention. See, a year ago when I was writing these, I was like a lot more dramatic about it, I feel like. Now, the Ramsey family, again, they're very private people, but they would soon become household names, their lives dissected by the media, law enforcement, and the public. The Christmas of 1996 seemed to have been a relatively normal Christmas for the Ramsey family. That evening, they attended a Christmas dinner at the home of their friends, Fleet and Priscilla White. They returned home from the dinner a little bit before 10 p.m. Now, in the beginning of the investigation, the Ramseys tell investigators that when they got home from the party, John had gone upstairs to read to JonBenét before Patsy came in and tucked her in. But they changed the story quickly, and this is touched on in the new Netflix documentary. What they ended up standing by for years was that JonBenét had fallen asleep in the car on the way home. So John, I keep saying Jean. Like JonBenét. So John carried her directly up to bed, and she never woke up after being home. Now, this seems like a small error in memory, but it does become important later in the story, and it is one of the things that people point to say, oh, the parents are lying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the Netflix documentary, this is explained by basically what John and Patsy claimed for years later is that whoever took that report, the police officer writing that down, wrote it down incorrectly. Because what the report said was that John told him that John had taken JonBenét to bed and read to her before she went to sleep. But what John and Patsy later stuck by was that John carried her up to bed, and then John went and read in his room, just read before he went to sleep.
Yeah, one of his own books.
You could see how that could be a misunderstanding, or it could be a lie. Now, the plan for the following day, December 26th, was for the family to take one of the private jets to Michigan to meet John's older kids for a second Christmas celebration with the extended family. For this reason, the couple woke up pretty early, around 5:30 a.m. Patsy planned to make breakfast for everyone before they left to catch their flight, so she was the first one to head downstairs. Now, in order to follow the story, it is very important to understand the layout of this 6,500-foot home. It's a massive home. And I found great diagrams of the house on the Denver Post website. So we are going to share that on Facebook and Instagram. So you can find it there. You can find it on their website. I hope they don't care that we're sharing it. I'll tag them in it. But you can see exactly where every room is that we're talking about and whatever. It is pretty important to the story. So the Ramsey house was actually 3 stories tall plus a basement. So altogether, there's 4 floors. The very top floor of the house was where John and Patsy's bedroom was, along with a large walk-in closet, a dressing room, and 2 bathrooms. 2 bathrooms. And that's not really important to the story, but it's important to me.
Same.
2 bathrooms in your
You don't know
master.
how much value 2 bathrooms have until you only have 1.
Dude.
And you're living with multiple people.
Yeah, horrible. Now, the house was one of those houses with 2 sets of staircases. So heading down one flight of stairs from John and Patsy's floor, you'd come to the second floor where all of the children's bedrooms were. Then, pretty much right outside JonBenét's bedroom, was a spiral staircase that led down to a small hall on the first floor that connected to a garage/mudroom area, a study, a second hall, and the kitchen. So this hall basically connects a ton of different rooms on the first floor.
Could you imagine playing tag or hide and seek in that fucking house?
No.
Yeah.
I would get lost in this house. Now, so this spiral staircase, which, spoiler alert, is where the ransom note is found. The top of it is pretty much right outside JonBenét's bedroom. And It was on the third step of this staircase that Patsy discovers that 3-page handwritten ransom note that morning. Now, the note read,
Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier delivery pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny, as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory, SBTC. Now I know what you're thinking. Did Kelsey really just have an AI voice read the JonBenét ransom note in a dramatic transatlantic accent? Why, yes. Yes, she did.
SBTC.
Good question. No one knows. No one knows what it means. A lot.
First of all, that letter is very fucking long.
Very long, right?
Very long. And kind of like all over the place. Like, why is it so specific on so many different random shit?
I'm glad that those are 2 points you mentioned because my next sentence says, there are a few important things to know about this ransom note. First of all, it's long as fuck. It's 2.5
Literally.
pages to be exact. So.
Yeah. Who has time to write 2.5 pages?
Well,
you know?
That's the thing is because it was later discovered that the note was written from like on a notepad that was found in the kitchen. Like it was the Ramseys' notepad, specifically Patsy's notepad. And it was written with a pen. I believe it was a Sharpie pen that was also found in the house that like belonged to them.
That's really
so
weird.
It's not like they wrote it elsewhere and brought it with them.
Yeah.
They wrote it inside the house and left it there.
I mean, what a novel though on spot, you know?
Right?
Very creative.
Good creativity.
Yeah.
Now, according to CBS Real Crime, former FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clemente said that a note of this length would take the average person 21 minutes to handwrite.
Damn.
21 minutes to handwrite. And honestly, I meant to try it myself and handwrite this and see how long it would take me. And I forgot.
Plus, it's like, I would look at that and be like, that's a lot of work. I don't really want to do that.
Dude, 21 minutes to handwrite?
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot. Now, a lot of people point to this because they're like, if you're in someone else's home, you know the parents are home, you're abducting the daughter, why would you stand there and write this for 21 minutes?
The whole family's home. What if Burke woke up?
Everybody's home.
You know?
Like
what What if one of the kids woke up in the middle of the night and came down and saw
And you
them?
know the parents are there. You know there's an adult there because no one's leaving their 6-year-old home alone at night.
But then they're like, oh, wait, let me spend 20 minutes on a ransom note.
Right.
Weird.
It is odd.
Weird.
Now, I guess I'm trying not to skip ahead too much because I'm going to mention this 5 more times. But, you know, some people who go for like the intruder theory think that maybe they didn't write this while they were in the home. Maybe this person broke into the home while the Ramseys were at dinner. They wrote the note in preparation.
Oh, and then waited for them
to come home. And then they left the note and they did plan to kidnap JonBenét, but then things went wrong.
I mean, that makes sense because, I mean, then they could take all the time. I mean, but still.
That makes more sense to me than they're like writing it while John and Patsy are just like upstairs sleeping.
They've got to be a bold motherfucker, though, because I don't know. Wouldn't you be scared they were going to come home?
Well, that's the thing is like there's other weird things about this too is like, so first of all, the fact that the note was written on the house, the fact that whoever wrote this note didn't bring their own stuff to write it with,
or like have it already written and prepared.
And the other thing that you know, a lot of experts point out, which I believe also Jim Clemente pointed out, was that most ransom notes are short. Like they're only a few sentences long normally. So
because they're trying to get the fuck out of there.
Right.
They said, I don't got time to be spending novelty writing on this ransom note. I got to get out of here.
Exactly. And they also say that this indicates that maybe the ransom wasn't actually the motive of the crime. And the note was just written to cover up the crime. So people who believe that it's the family who is responsible for this, they say, oh, like the family wrote it. It's all bullshit, whatever.
I mean, I could see that theory because it's all their shit anyway. Like their pen, their notepad, Did they test the handwriting though?
Oh, come on. You know the answer to that, and we're going to get to it. We're going to get to it.
I'm strapping myself back. This is my favorite case. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Try not to get ahead of myself.
No, it's okay. I want you to ask the questions anyway, because in case I didn't put it in here, we can talk about it. But okay. I feel like
you got 50 pages. I hope you did.
But it's just like the other thing people ask is like, why wouldn't you type it? Like this is 1996. Like you could type it and
not have to worry about your handwriting being out there.
Right. Which just would make the most sense. And I don't know. I agree. The whole note is fucking weird. Yeah. I think the notes, no matter who did it, I think this note is absolute
bonkers
bullshit.
Yeah.
Like that was not the motive it wasn't just money that was the motive for this crime, in my opinion. Now, later on, there were like practice notes that were discovered in the house. One on this notepad that it was written on. One began, it said Mr. and Mrs. R. And that was then crossed out and it was still like left in the notepad. So this is odd because why was the practice note addressed to both of them? Then they cross it out and they redo it. And then the actual note only said to Mr. Ramsey. It was only addressed to John.
That makes me think that they spent even more than 20 minutes writing this note.
Oh, for sure. And so a lot of people say, well, if Patsy wrote the note, because we'll get to it, Patsy's the only one in the family whose handwriting was not conclusively ruled out. But if Patsy wrote the note, she was writing it, and then she's like, you know what? I don't want the blame to be on me. I'm just going to write it to John or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's weird.
So we don't know. Also interesting in this note is the amount that the letter writer asked for, which was $118,000.
That's
very specific.
Oddly specific and very low, in my opinion, for a ransom.
I don't know. I feel like that's a lot. I always hear people say, why didn't they ask for $5 million? I'm like, yeah, I feel like you just don't know how much money these people have. And like, if you don't have millions of dollars, I feel like $100,000 sounds like a lot of money.
Yeah, but like, it sounded like they knew who he was, or like at least what he did for a living, or else they wouldn't be asking for even that much.
Right. They knew he was wealthy, for sure.
So then why would they not ask for like an even 100,000 or like 150 or like why 180?
Well, that's the thing, is because I feel like are you propping me up for questions right now? Emily's asking questions she knows the fucking answers to. I kind of like this, dude. Let's go back. I feel like this is how I feel like, and I mean this in a positive way. This is how I feel like Crime Junkie set up is like Britt predicts the questions or predicts what Ashley's going to say next and then asks it in a question form. And I don't know.
I'll stop doing that.
No, I like it. I like it. I was like, wait, because usually you ask a question, I'm like, oh, I don't know. We got to Google it.
You're like, stop. I know the answer.
So the answer to that one, because I know it, is a lot of people theorize, and I personally believe this, is John's Christmas bonus the year before was $118,000.
Sheesh, that's very oddly specific.
So a lot of people are like, well, how would anybody know that? It must have been the family.
Yeah, can't be a coincidence. No way.
Here's the thing, though, is I don't think it's a coincidence. I do think that's why it was $118,000.
Because they're like, if they have any money, they know they have that because he got it for Christmas.
Right. But this is the thing, is it was literally like that bonus was from a year before. And that bonus was to be paid out. Like it wasn't just given to him in a lump sum. It was to be paid out in monthly installments throughout 1996. So I don't know. I read monthly. I thought that was weird. You would think it would be bi-weekly with every paycheck.
Yeah, but some people, I know a lot of corporate people, some get paid like once a month.
Either way, he was getting paid out in regular installments throughout 1996. So his pay stub would have showed that he was getting a portion of this money, and it likely would have also showed how often he was getting that portion. AKA, if someone were to see this pay stub, they could have done the math. Now, I've read different accounts of this. I read in multiple sources that this pay stub was in the kitchen. Some said on the counter, some said in the same drawer as the notepad, meaning they could have been found. I heard then I don't know if it was the Crime Junkie interview. I'm sorry, because I'm just going off rip. I wasn't going to include this. I don't know if it was the Crime Junkie interview or the Netflix documentary with John. John said, yeah, it would have been out somewhere, maybe in my office. So to me, it's very unclear where this pay stub actually was at the time of the crime, or these pay stubs, plural.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there is consensus that they were accessible in the home.
Easily accessible.
They wouldn't have been locked up somewhere. They were at the house, and they were out, and they were accessible.
It would have been nice if we had that like conclusively stated, maybe by the police. Would be nice. Exactly. That's kind of like what they're supposed to be doing in their job. I don't know.
Exactly. And this is the kind of stuff where I feel like people at home might be like screaming, and they're like, I know exactly where it was, and I know that this is a fact. So just know, whenever I say I don't know exactly, because we got one bad review about this, I'm not going to make shit up and make it. If I don't know for sure, I'm going to tell you guys I don't know, and this is why. And I have searched. If I'm telling you I don't know, I have already searched for the answer, and I was not able to find it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I would love for you to share that with us. Yeah, just do it nicely.
Maybe calm down.
Just do it nicely. So anyway, like a lot of people at first, especially, they were thinking that maybe the fact that this $118,000 was a sign that the crime was some sort of business retaliation against John, like someone he worked with, because how would anyone but John and those inside his company know the exact amount of his bonus? But like I said, I read that it was kind of like just laying out in the house. So to me, I don't know. It's kind of a moot point, though. If someone had the time to write this 2.5-page ransom note in the house, I feel like they had the time to be poking around the house and find this statement.
Well, yeah, maybe if they were at the dinner and they were just like, ooh, what can I find? Like, what can I do? And then maybe they saw pictures of JonBenét and was like, ooh, maybe I kidnapped her. And then he found this pay stub and he's like, oh, well, he has all this money. I don't know, man. But that's so specific, though. Because, like, why would it say this is a portion of $118,000 that's being paid out every week?
I think it would show that it was a bonus to be paid. Like, it would show the amount that he was paid on that pay stub.
Yeah.
And it would likely show that I'm just basing this off my own pay stub. Like, it would likely show how often, like, that you're getting that on every pay stub or what installment number it is. But everybody's is different, and I haven't seen an actual photo of this pay stub. So now I know that, like, there's not always a place for speculation in true crime. It's like, let's stick to the facts. But I think this is one case where it's like speculation is necessary because there's so much. So sorry if you don't like speculation, but we're doing it.
Because we don't have the solid facts, which would be nice.
So the letter, I think we touched on all the main points for now. I'm sure we will be coming back to it. I guarantee you we will be coming back to it. So if you're like, you forgot something, don't worry. We'll get there eventually.
We'll wrap around.
But what I want to move on. So according to an interview that Patsy did with CNN, she didn't even finish reading the note when she found it. Once she read, "We have your daughter," she immediately ran back upstairs and into JonBenét's room to look for her. But the 6-year-old was not there. She immediately started screaming for John and eventually headed back downstairs where she called 911 from a wall phone in the kitchen at 5:52 a.m. Now, if you don't know what a wall phone is,
what a sign of the times.
Because literally I made a TikTok video where I was talking about a phone or something, and people are like, how did they call in the 80s? Like, they didn't have cell phones. It was like a home phone. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You think they didn't have phones at all? I'm like, I don't know when the first phone was invented.
Did you never have dial-up internet?
No, they didn't.
God.
So I don't think we have that many young listeners, but a wall phone is like a phone that is screwed into your wall and has a cord coming out of it.
Hardwired in.
So she, at 5:52 a.m., she calls 911 from the wall phone in the kitchen. And some people like to argue that it was suspicious that Patsy called the police, even though the note explicitly told her not to. Because the note said, like, if you call police, if you call the FBI, like, she's dead, whatever. But honestly, I'm not even arguing that Patsy's not involved. I'm just saying that's a dumb point to make. Because anyone smart would call the police in this scenario.
Yeah, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that.
Right. So that makes no sense to me. Now, Patsy does end up contradicting this statement about, like, this order of events later on. She later tells police that she first went into JonBenét's room, saw that she wasn't there, then went down to look for her downstairs, and that this is when she found the ransom note. So it's flip-flopping whether she's found JonBenet was missing in bed or found the note first. So some people point to, hard to keep your story straight if you're lying. Now, I am going to play the audio from this 911 call. I want you to pay close attention to the end of the call. You will hear where Patsy obviously had tried to hang up the call, but the call remains connected, and the dispatcher, who was named Kimberly Archuleta, continues to listen.
What's your name? Are you Patsy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God! Please. Okay, I'm sending an officer over, okay? Do you know how long she's been gone? No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please. Okay, girl. There's somebody. I am, honey. Please. Take a deep breath. Please, hurry. Patsy?
The quality's giving wall phone.
For real. So I want to go over a lot of this. One argument I see all the time, and again, I don't want it to sound like I'm arguing that the parents had nothing to do with this, but I do think that there's a lot of like arguments that people point to like make them look guilty that in my opinion make no sense. And if you're going to, point out arguments that make them look guilty, you should find good ones. And one that I've read is that like, oh, Patsy never even says JonBenét's name on this call. It's all about Patsy. She says, my daughter, blah, blah, blah. Here's what I will say. If I was telling someone a story about my brother, Zach, for example, you guys, I talk about my brother because you don't know my brother. So if I just said Zach, you wouldn't understand the association. So I'm not going to tell you a story like Zach told me the other day. You're going to be like, who the fuck is Zach?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say my brother or my brother Zach, whatever. And so I could see like, she goes, we have a kidnapping. And the dispatcher's like, you have a kidnapping. And she's asking her who's missing. She says, my daughter. Like she's answering the questions.
Mm-hmm.
And this dispatcher later goes on, you'll see her in a bunch of different like documentaries and interviews telling her opinion about how I knew something was off. Oh, did you? Maybe by the screaming woman saying that there's a kidnapping and her daughter's missing. Like
like what was her ground to
she's
say
like,
that?
I just knew. And it bothers me. It just bothers, this lady bothers me personally.
There was a lot of people that said that though. Like that fucking, who was that lady? She's like, oh, I just saw something in his eyes.
Oh, well, we're going to get there. We're going to get there to Linda Arndt.
Yeah.
However, here's the thing is the main thing, like however you feel about the audio that I just played for you, what you could hear and what was not legible because that's
I literally
reading,
was just gonna say legible.
What's here? Audible. Thank you.
Hey.
For 30 days free on Audible, go to audibletrial.com/a trial by podcast.
Didn't even have to Google that.
However, like what is Audible? Like you decide, you make your own opinion about that. I played the audio for you. I told you what I thought, but that's just my opinion. Everyone has a different opinion.
Twitch down.
Here's the thing is, based on what we can hear, there's really no facts that you can discern from it.
Sounds just like a frantic mom.
One thing that people point out, you know what I love about this case is I'm barely reading off my script because I just know it so deep in my soul.
Same. I'm like, wait, what happened?
So one thing that people point out about the call is that she says, it says victory, SBTC. And people are like, well, she told CNN that she didn't even read the whole letter before calling 911. She just ran up to look for JonBenét after she read that they had her daughter. And it's like, well, here's the thing. If you have a three-page note, and the lady on, like Kim Archuleta, the dispatcher, asks her, do you know who has her or do you know who took her, something like that? In my mind, you're probably holding the note. So even if you didn't read the whole thing,
flip it over.
You flip to the end to see if it's signed or something. So I don't know. That's another one. It's like, again, I'm not arguing that this means Patsy didn't have anything to do with this. I'm just saying it's not a good argument to point to her actually having something to do with it.
I would do the same thing. I'd look at, like I said before, I would take one look at that note, that 3-page note, and be like, too long. Who wrote it? Who's it to? What are the main points? I would skim that bitch.
Right. Exactly. Like, and I feel like that's kind of when the dispatcher asks you, like, where, do you know who has, like, you're answering questions. And again, like, I don't know, just my opinion. Now, the other main thing on this audio is really the last few seconds of the call that are inaudible, in my opinion. So in the CBS documentary that aired in 2016, this is the one. If you don't know it, I'll give you a quick overview. They basically make the argument that it was Burke who killed JonBenét, that he did it on accident. She took a piece of his pineapple while he was snacking. He was mad. He hit her with the flashlight. And then the parents did everything else to cover it up because they wanted to protect Burke. And, at surface level, it's like it's a good theory.
Makes sense. It had me going for years, to be honest.
This is the one theory that I will be honest about up front. I am biased. I think this theory sucks and is very, very unlikely. When it comes to whether the parents were involved or if it was an intruder, I feel very 50-50. I cannot figure it out. But the Burke theory, and I'll slowly throughout this case tell you why I think that. However, in this documentary, they get these audio experts to like dive deep into this audio and clean it up because now they have all this new technology. And I want you guys to go play that clip for yourselves. If you watch this, and now that I like doing the podcast, I've learned so much about audio, and this is the most bullshit scene they're literally turning knobs on something. And I'm like, that is not how you clean up audio. Like cleaning up audio is like done on a computer.
Digital. Yeah.
It's not like they're like, I don't know if it's like recording equipment or what, but I'm like, this is bullshit. I think they did clean up the audio, but the way that they showed it, like as if they're doing it right in front of the camera, is absolute fucking bullshit. They're setting a scene. And
I don't know though, because I used to go to work with my dad a lot, and he worked in like marketing, and they had like a whole fucking room full of like those things all over the wall.
But this is recording equipment.
Yeah, but like they had knobs and shit to where they could like
for post-production
move like something up and down.
I guess.
Where
I mean, yeah. I guess
I'm
not using the most.
I mean, I could be wrong, but like
equipment.
I feel like that makes sense.
I don't know. Either way, I do think they cleaned it up. When I thought they were using like B-roll or something of them like turning knobs that like had nothing to do with it.
Actually doing it.
Either way, I do think that they cleaned it up. And I'm going to tell you what they say they hear. I want everyone to go on YouTube and like play this clip over and over and over and over again, and like with your eyes closed, and tell me if you actually fucking hear this, because in my opinion, I do not hear this at all. And maybe that's just me. Maybe I've got bad ears, whatever. But I like, did you hear it do you have any idea what I'm about to say they said? Because
No.
I played it. I played that part of it for you.
Wasn't it where she puts the phone down and is like, there's mumbles? No, you can't hear that shit.
No, exactly. It drives me crazy.
I remember I think I have heard the like cleaned up audio before. And
so they say that when she thinks she hangs up the phone, they say that they can hear Patsy, or a female voice, saying, "Help me, Jesus, help me, Jesus." That is the only one that I'm like, okay, maybe.
Yeah.
I do hear they are talking.
Yeah.
And I do feel like at least the first one, like, "Help me, Jesus." I never would have heard that. I'm like, I don't even feel certain that that's what she said.
Yeah.
But I kind of, I'm like, okay, maybe. The rest of this, I'm like, I do not hear this at all personally. That doesn't mean that's not what they're saying. It just means I can't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So they say a female voice says, "Help me, Jesus, help me, Jesus." Then a male voice says, "We're not speaking to you." And in the documentary, they say he says it in a very like authoritative tone, as if you're talking to a child. I'm like, okay, you definitely cannot hear the fucking tone. Maybe you can hear words, but like you can't hear the tone.
Yeah.
I don't hear those words at all.
Same.
I don't hear any words. I just hear mumbling.
I honestly didn't even hear a man's voice.
They say we hear a male voice saying, "We're not speaking to you." And then a child's voice saying, "What did you find?" Again, I don't hear it at all. I'm going to play it one more time.
Patsy?
One more time.
Patsy?
One more time.
Patsy?
Okay, I can hear her saying, "Help me, Jesus, help me, Jesus." I can hear it now. But like after that, nothing. Faintly, maybe like a deeper tone voice at the end, but like there's no way I can fucking hear that saying.
I just like it that one, I'm like, I don't understand what people are talking about with this.
Yeah,
and
no.
again, I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm saying I don't hear it, and it's not convincing to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
And again, big topic of debate. So after getting off the phone with 911, after she hangs up, which I do think is weird that she hung up early, personally, I feel like if I was calling 911, like I would not want to get off the phone until someone was there, because I'd be like, what if they're in the house, or what if whatever? Like I'd be scared, and I would not want to hang up until they got there. So I did find that a little bit odd, for sure. So after she gets off the phone with them, Patsy called 2 sets of friends and asked them to come over. And one of these couples was Fleet and Priscilla White, whose house they had dinner at the night before. And then the other couple was the Fernies. So there's John and Barbara Fernie. Lastly, she called the family's pastor to come over. Pastor or priest? I don't know what the difference is. I put pastor. Now, just before 6 a.m., Boulder police officers Rick French and Carl Veitch arrive at the home. According to the book Foreign Faction by James Kohler, when the officers arrived, John was dressed in khakis and a button-up, and Patsy was wearing a sweater and slacks with her hair and makeup done. In fact, she was in the same outfit that she wore to the Christmas dinner the night before. Now, this is a little bit odd because she didn't mention getting ready in the morning, like why is her hair and makeup done? And like if your daughter's missing, why would you put on like makeup and a whole outfit?
Yeah.
And you would assume, she said she just woke up. Why isn't she in pajamas, like looking disheveled? And like when she was questioned later on, she just tells them that she had just brushed her teeth. So she didn't say anything about like,
did they not
doing her hair
ask
and
her like,
makeup.
oh, so did you sleep in your makeup and clothes from the night before?
I can't, if they did, I can't find the answer to it anywhere. But this is what I will say. And I have 2 proposed explanations for this. One, she could be like me. Actually, I have 3. One, she could be like me and she had a couple too many glasses of wine the night before. She went to bed fully clothed with her makeup on and
Just
woke up that
zonked.
way. However, I've read accounts that people were like, no, it was fresh. She looked fresh. So,
But also that was her like vibe, wasn't it? Like, wasn't she into like makeup and hair and like fashion and
yeah.
I mean, I get that it's like your daughter is fucking missing, but that's should be
some
your last
people, like,
priority.
Some people describe it like, oh, it's like that. It's kind of like a Southern thing. And she
Yeah.
was in pageants and like she was taught as a young girl
To
like
look presentable.
you put yourself together
Yeah.
and look presentable if you're going to have people in your house and
Mhm.
whatever. So another option is maybe she did get ready. Maybe she did do her hair and makeup and she just put on the same outfit that she had worn the night before. I rewear clothes. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
Third option
But like
is
to a Christmas party? I don't know. That seems like fancier.
right. I agree. But then they were also going to another Christmas celebration that day. They were taking the plane to Michigan and they were going to celebrate with John's like older kids.
Oh, well then maybe she
Maybe that's her
she
Christmas
got,
outfit.
Yeah, maybe she
Which,
got
by the
dressed
way,
up and
her and she had bought JonBenét a matching outfit with her outfit, but JonBenét wasn't wearing it because I guess JonBenét like threw a fit. Like she's like, I don't want to wear that. I want to wear my Silver Star shirt.
yeah.
So maybe she was like, well, we didn't get to wear the matching outfits yesterday. We're going to wear them today.
Mhm.
And then, she finds John's, I don't know. A third option is she had something to, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but this is a possibility. She murdered her daughter or had something to do with it or covered it up. And she knew there's going to be a lot of press and a lot of people in the house. And she didn't want to like look bad.
Or she never went to bed.
Yes, absolutely. But to me, it's another thing. It's like, this isn't a great point to say that these people are guilty.
Yeah, just
It's
because
weird.
she has the same outfit on, that doesn't mean she killed her
It's
daughter.
weird, but it's not. It's
not damning.
Yeah, it's not damning. So after the officers got there, they read the ransom note and then they go and conduct a quick search of the house, just like looking for JonBenét. And I assume just to make sure there weren't like any intruders in the home or anyone still there.
Yeah.
This initial search turned up no signs of forced entry and no sign of JonBenét. According to Newsweek, while searching in the basement, Officer French, quote, came to a door secured with a wooden latch. According to police reports obtained by Newsweek, he paused for a moment in front of the door but walked away, end quote. What he did not realize was behind that door was JonBenét's lifeless body, which wouldn't be discovered for at least 6 more hours.
That's insane.
It is. Now, it's reported that French's reasoning for not opening the door was that he was looking for the presumed intruder's exit point. And because the door was latched from the outside of the room, The intruder couldn't have left through that room because there's no way you'd be able to latch the door latch on that side of the door.
I mean, I get it, but also
But also you should just check every room.
check everywhere. But was he the only one looking too? There was not like a handful of people that were searching the entire
I believe
house?
there were 2 officers, but in this description from Newsweek, they're talking about French was the one. So I don't know if they were like dividing and conquering.
Yeah, like you take upstairs, I'll do downstairs.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know it was Officer French at this point. Now, it's also important to note that this room, which the Ramseys refer to it as the wine cellar, it actually wasn't a wine cellar. Like, it was kind of an unfinished room. It was like the old coal room back in the day because the house was old.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only accessible through another room in the basement. So you could not get to this room, this wine cellar room where her body was found, without going through what they call the train room. They call it the train room because the kids had like a toy train set up on it in that room. And you can see this on the diagrams that we're going to share on Facebook and Instagram, you can find them online from the Denver Post. So this room has no windows. It's off on its own. No one's going to accidentally go into that room.
Mm-hmm.
Just an important point. But it's weird that when you're searching the house, that you would, for a missing child, that you wouldn't go in there. To me, it seems like the perfect, like if a kid's playing hide and go seek, obviously you wouldn't think that because no way a 6-year-old wrote that note. But it's like, why wouldn't you go in there? It's just weird, and it's a huge, massive, massive, massive mistake that I think is the reason this case is unsolved to this day, is because everything becomes contaminated because she was not discovered by the police.
I'm trying to like put myself in his shoes and be like, why would I not open this door? And I can't. Like, I can't, because if that's really the only reason, like, why would you not also be like, oh, well, maybe she's in here and they just like locked the door behind them and she's stuck in here.
The only thing I can think of, and again, this is a huge mistake, but it's like everybody is human.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is that when you read a ransom note and you're inexperienced and all of that, you think that the child has been taken. You don't expect, you're not looking for the child. If anything, yes, you're doing due diligence, but like really, if you're looking around and you truly believe in your mind that the child has been taken, you're just making sure there's no one in the home, or you're looking for evidence or an exit point. Like, where did the intruder come in and out? So I could see in your mind, if you truly believe the child was taken, which at this point they have reason to, how you could make the mistake. That doesn't say it's okay. I'm not saying it's okay to make that mistake, but I could see how that happens. So soon after this initial search, more officers begin to arrive. And it wasn't until about 8 a.m. that the first investigator, like the first detective, who was Detective Linda Arndt, arrived on the scene and began to prepare for the Ramseys for the ransom call, which again was supposed to happen between 8 and 10 a.m. because the note read, "I will call you tomorrow between 8 and 10 a.m. So while Detective Arndt was prepping them, a forensics team started to dust the house for fingerprints, and the police closed off JonBenét's room with crime scene tape. However, this was the only room in the entire house that was sealed off. The rest of the house was a free-for-all for everyone there, which at this point not only included the Ramseys and the investigators, but also the Ramseys' friends, Fleet and Priscilla White, John and Barbara Fernie, the Ramseys' pastor or priest, and a team of victim advocates that, like, all of these people were just roaming freely throughout the house, everywhere. Now, after arriving at the home, Fleet White began searching as well. He went down to the basement to look around, and he noticed that the middle of 3 basement windows was open. He then noticed that the door to the wine cellar was shut, so he opened the door to look in. But it was pitch black, and he couldn't find the light switch. And he just didn't see anything suspicious, so he just closed the door and left the room. Now, at some point, Burke was woken up around this time. I believe it was around 9 a.m. And he was reportedly taken to the Whites' home to like get him out of the house.
Yeah.
How the fuck he was sleeping through all this, I don't know, because like Patsy was literally screaming on the 911 call, and some people say he wasn't because they could hear him on the 911 call. Odd.
But also, why would they not wake him up and be like, hey, have you seen your sister? Or like, because
Did you hear or see anything?
Yeah, it wasn't his room right next to JonBenét's.
No, so his room was actually pretty far from JonBenét's. If you look at the Denver Post diagrams that we post, they were kind of not completely on two opposite sides of the house, but there were multiple rooms in between them, at least 2 large rooms.
Okay, but like still, I would be waking him up and be like, "Hey, have you seen your sister?"
I agree. Or did you
just
see
let
anything
him
weird? Or
sleep
did
through
you
that
hear
shit.
anything? Right.
I mean, if she's yelling for John to come downstairs, why would Burke not hear him? You know, because John wasn't downstairs when she found the note.
That's true. That's true. Don't know.
Weird.
I do not know. Now, allowing free movement around the house was a major, major mistake by police. Any evidence that may be found later was pretty much tainted by this. And it's reported that at one point, Priscilla White actually began cleaning up the kitchen and was like wiping down the counters.
Oh.
Like she's trying to be helpful.
Yeah, like what a nice friend. Like, oh, like let me just clean up your dishes, and she probably has no fucking clue.
Right. I don't blame her. I blame the police for letting her do that. Like,
oh,
that
they didn't
is
even say anything?
Crazy. Yeah, because they're just like, it's not like they're keeping all the people in one room and like watching them. They're just roaming freely about the house.
Yeah, willy-nilly.
Right. The only room that was taped off was JonBenét's room. So
even though the note was found on the stairs?
Yes.
Oh my.
Yes.
Who the fuck?
It's like, where is your due diligence?
Yeah,
I have to tell you a story. Like, my car got stolen earlier this year, and they found it totaled. And literally, I had to go into the police station, and they were like fingerprinting this thing and testing it for DNA, like swabbing it for DNA. And they were like they had me come in and like identify stuff in the car, whether it was mine or not. They took the computer data from like what was plugged into the stereo, whose phones were plugged in. I'm like, I swear to God, the police department with my stolen car took more diligence in what they were doing than these people. Like, I don't understand it. Now, in an interview with ABC News, Detective Arndt mentions that at one point, John was just like looking through the mail, and Linda Arndt like points this out, and she's like, this stuck out to me. She uses the term stuck out. Basically just saying like, you know, he's just casually flipping through the mail. But John explains this as saying, I was looking for more communication from the kidnapper, because they said they had to contact them again. They didn't say where they were going to meet and do this exchange.
Yeah.
How were they going to contact them? I think it's kind of, it makes sense to assume maybe it's going to be a letter if they're not calling.
Also, what a small thing to yell at him for when you guys didn't fucking make sure the crime scene was closed off. Maybe he wouldn't be looking for the fucking through the mail if you guys told him, like, nobody touch anything. We're still doing fingerprints and DNA. We need to make sure, like, this is an active crime scene. I don't understand how her room was the only one that was closed off.
Right.
That makes no sense.
Right.
It sounds like she's just trying to, like, cover her ass and, like, point the eyes somewhere else so they can't look at her terrible fucking job.
Now, in the same interview, Arndt says, quote, 10 o'clock comes and goes, and there's no acknowledgement in the house from anyone that the deadline imposed by the author of the ransom note has come and gone, end quote. I am going to dive into this because if my daughter was taken and the ransom note says I'm going to do an exchange, I'm going to call you or contact you about an exchange between 8 and 10 a.m. And 10 a.m. passes, I am losing my mind.
Oh, I'd be sitting at the phone, very impatiently waiting and looking at the clock to see what time it was. And it'd probably feel like 3 hours has gone by.
I would be losing my mind. So when I used to look at this and I was like, well, this is crazy. They obviously did it, or they obviously had something to do with it. However, John makes a great point about this. he said, and he said this in so many interviews, I can't even quote one. He says, what the note said, quote, I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier pickup of your daughter, end quote. So what John says about this is that the way the ransom note is written, it sounds like they might be calling the next day. Because you have to think, okay, yes, if they wrote this at 11 p.m., then technically tomorrow is this morning that they're all in the house waiting for this call. But you would assume if you're writing a ransom note for people to find when they wake up, you assume they're finding it in the morning. So tomorrow would actually mean the following day. Plus, because it says, I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow. Plus, they say, the delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be well rested. Well, how can you rest right now if you're waking up in the morning and it's only going to come, they're going to call you in an hour or two to like do this delivery. So you would think that's giving them a night. So I don't think he's not saying he assumed it was the next day, but he's saying when it didn't come, he wasn't losing his shit because he's like, oh, they must have meant tomorrow, not today.
Yeah, I don't know. They seem too lax to me.
I agree. I do agree. I still would be, I would have at least been like asking, do you think they meant tomorrow or something?
Yeah.
But like, we're not in the house, so we don't know every conversation. I do still think it's weird, but that explanation made it seem a little bit less weird to me. A little bit less weird.
Okay.
And also, Linda Arndt said, she doesn't say John gave no acknowledgement of it. She said no one in the house gave any acknowledgement that the time had come and gone. It's like, it's all the Ramsey's friends. I don't know if maybe they weren't allowed to read the letter or something, but
yeah, like I'm sure they probably
why wasn't anyone else freaking out either? Like, what was just, they must have been discussing this at some point. It's just weird. So when the detectives discovered that the note, like I said earlier, had been written on Patsy's notepad from the house, they started to look at the family a little bit more suspiciously because it's a few hours into the day that they realize this, it sounds like. Now, pretty early on, the detectives think that this note is bogus. They're like, this is so weird. It's so long. The wording is weird. Who uses the fucking word attaché besides a Southern Georgia?
I was like, what the? I had to Google it. I was like, what the fuck is an attaché?
Right. And it's just weird. Like, there's a lot of things that they point to in this note. I think these details maybe matter, maybe don't. So I'm going to go over them very briefly. They use the word attaché, but then the word business is spelled wrong. Stuff like that. Like they're using this really big vocabulary and then basic words are spelled wrong. And it just seems like someone who uses the word attaché knows how to spell business. So they're saying, well, maybe they purposely spelled business wrong to like throw you off their tracks or whatever. But either way, the detectives are like, this note's bullshit. Whether or not one of the Ramseys wrote it, they're not sure. Now, at some point, after Fleet had searched the basement, John actually went down to the basement and noticed the open window. Now, that open window is actually broken. And John had broken it himself prior, like when he was locked out of the house. I have read different timelines for this. Some people said earlier that summer, which was months before. Some people said it was weeks before. But all we know is that at one point,
it was broken for a while.
It was broken for a while. John had broken it himself to get into the house because he had locked himself out. He thought that they had repaired it, but they didn't. And the reason that this is, the way that this window is this window is actually underground. And there's like a hole dug in the ground next to the house that has some like guarding up to keep the earth away from the window. So it's letting light into the basement, even though the window is actually below the ground level. And
we got to put a picture because in the Netflix documentary, it like shows a visual of it.
Right. So there's
a
grate above this.
And you can lift it up.
Yes. And if you live in Colorado, like I used to live in Colorado and I saw this at a bunch of different houses. But in Ohio, it's not a thing. Like, I've never seen that in a house in Ohio. So I don't know, how common it is. We'll put a picture on the Instagram and Facebook post
because
for
it's
this episode.
Sus. I'm like, damn. If somebody knew where that was, they could easily get into the house.
Right. And the other thing with that, too, is a lot of people are like, how would John not realize that they didn't replace a broken window? It's like, well, unless you're in the basement all the time, which if you see pictures of the basement, they obviously weren't. It wasn't like a finished basement that they're hanging out in all the time.
it was kind of a creepy looking basement.
So, I could see how you could forget about this broken window for sure, at least from the outside of the house. Like, you're never seeing this. And another thing about this window, just really quick, that people argue all the time is that a grown man couldn't fit through it. Well, here's two things. If John broke it, if that story is true and John broke it to get into the house, John obviously fit through the window.
Yeah, point A.
Second of all, I've seen multiple videos of a grown man, Detective Lou Schmidt, going through that window. So a grown man fits through that.
Yeah,
window.
they proved that shit.
Now, John also noticed that there was a suitcase underneath the window, almost step below it, like a step. You could step onto it because this window's pretty high up on the wall. So you could step onto the suitcase to get out of the window, possibly. And John he thought this was weird immediately because that suitcase didn't belong there. It was their suitcase, but that's not where they would leave it.
Yeah,
it was
in the middle of the room, yeah.
So John thought this was weird. So he closes the window and goes back upstairs. That's what he says. However, in a crime scene video, which was taken after John said that he closed the window was open. So John said, I closed that.
This window's giving me chills. Like, this is a creepy window.
Well, part of me is like, was the guy whoever did this in the room with JonBenét? Like, you never know.
Me out.
I don't think so. I think that's very unlikely. But it's like, well, if no one opened the door to that room, he could have been in there. And then
you never know.
He's like, oh, John closed this window. I got to get out. I don't think that's possible. I'm sure there were people actually.
Well, yeah, because it was shut from the outside. He couldn't have shut it from the inside.
No, he could. I think he could have shut it.
Or like,
because it was broken.
From the inside? Because the door where JonBenét was found.
No, but if he went into the basement from that room, he could have latched the door from the inside and then gone out the window.
Oh.
But I think that's very unlikely. It's just, it's like, you never know because whatever. But I don't think that's what happened. So he says he closes the window. Then there's a crime scene video that shows the window open. And we know that this was after John was saying he closed it. So, did someone forget? Did someone reopen it? Did John get his timing wrong? Is he lying? We don't know. Now, Detective Arndt told ABC News that by 10:30 in the morning, she was the only police officer in the house, and she was wildly outnumbered by the Ramsey family and their friends. So it's just her. It's the Ramseys, their pastor, the Whites, and the Fernies. So there's a lot of people, against her at this. I mean, they shouldn't have been against her. They should have all been on the same team, but whatever. Mm-hmm. So she's saying that she called the police department multiple times asking for backup, but she was told that everyone was in a meeting at the time and they would come later. And it's also an important point to note. This is the day after Christmas, so a lot of the detectives and higher ups are off. They're not working.
Yeah.
So at this point, tensions among the group in the home were rising. And Arndt was feeling, quote, tremendous pressure, end quote, as the only officer on the scene. Because really, this is a crime scene. She's supposed to be controlling all of these people. But there's John, Patsy, their 4 friends, and the pastor. So she was one person trying to control 7 people.
It sounds like somebody that is easily overwhelmed probably should not have the position she did.
I think it's twofold. I think maybe that's true, but also she shouldn't have been alone there. There should have been other people there this whole time helping her. And eventually, at this point, John is basically just freaking out. He's just pacing around looking for stuff to do. And eventually, in an attempt to subdue this building tension in the house, Detective Arndt says that she told John and Fleet to search the house again because she wanted to give him some sort of task to take his mind off what was going on, just keep him busy. And so she tells John to search the house, quote, from top to bottom, end quote. Now, this is another thing that people point to as being very suspicious, because after Arndt says search from top to bottom, John and Fleet go straight to the basement.
They both go to the basement?
Yes. I don't know if John goes first and then Fleet follows, but they both end up in the basement. So she says search from top to bottom. A lot of people are like, well, that means you start on the top floor. To me, you're on the first floor. If you're searching from top to bottom, it's like, well, the easier starting point is the basement, and then you go up. I don't know. I don't think it's
so
that
many
weird.
people had already been in the basement, and I'm sure they probably got a spooky feeling. They're like, something happened down here. So
and
my
he knew
thing
that
would go, I would just be like, all right, I'm going to start in the basement because I got vibes from down there.
And he saw that the window was open down there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, this could be suspicious, but to me, it just seems like there's an easy explanation. It's not that weird.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think it's weird. So
Okay.
they start down in the basement. And the other thing, too, is the top floor, that's where John and Patsy's room was. So I feel like you kind of know, well, I was up there all night and I feel like I would have woken up. So why would you start there? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so a little after 1 p.m., they're in the basement. This is 7 hours after the police arrived. John opens the door to the wine cellar. Fleet White is down in the basement with him. And he opens the door. He says, "Oh my God." He flips on the light, and there's JonBenét under a blanket in the room.
7 hours later. That's what I can't get around.
So she was lying on the ground with her hands above her head, and her wrists were tied together very loosely with braided nylon cord. So loosely that a lot of people say it never would have kept her hands together if she was fighting against it. Now, every source I found called this nylon stuff a cord. When I saw it in pictures, it looks like a rope to me, like a thin rope. It's not like a electrical cord or anything like that.
Okay. My mind's going to paracord. You remember those keychains?
Yeah, kind of, but thinner.
Okay.
There was duct tape over her mouth and a white blanket covering her upper body. She was wearing a white t-shirt with a sequin star on it, which is the shirt that she wore to the Christmas dinner the night before. And she was also wearing white pajama pants / long johns.
Okay. I was going to say, she was in her whole outfit from the night before? That's weird.
I don't know what pants she wore to the Christmas dinner, but I don't think it was the long
PJs?
johns.
Okay.
Obviously, I would assume not, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Now, there was also a Barbie nightgown that was found with her body, but she wasn't wearing it. So it's unclear where this, why it was there or where it came from. It's possible that it was rolled up in the blanket. I don't know. Couldn't find any more detail on this besides that it was found with her. And the nylon cord itself was found around her neck. And we're going to get into more detail about when and how this was found, but it was pulled so tightly around her neck that it dug into her skin, and her skin was kind of folding over it, which made it difficult to see. So John later says that, he didn't even realize there was anything around her neck at first because it was just so deeply embedded into her skin.
You couldn't even see the rope. Ugh.
Now, one end of the cord around her neck was tied around a broken paintbrush handle, creating a garrote, which is basically just a string with handles, so it's easier to pull tight to strangle someone. However, this one's a little bit different because normally a garrote would have handles on both ends. You can pull it tight with both hands. But this only had a handle on one end. And the rope itself was tied actually more like a noose. So when you would pull that, there was a knot around the rope that would slip and tightened around whatever you're putting it around. One other note about this garrote is the knot on it is very intricate. Very, very intricate. Not something a 9-year-old could tie, in my opinion, but I don't know about what they're teaching in Boy Scouts or if he was in whatever. Now, while Fleet runs upstairs to yell for someone to call an ambulance, but John immediately goes to his daughter. He pulls the blanket off JonBenét, and he pulled the duct tape off of her mouth. He then picked up her body and carried her upstairs. Her body was stiff already, which indicated that rigor mortis had already set in.
Man.
This is another thing. People are like, why would you pick her up?
He's your
it's your
dad.
fucking baby.
Yeah.
I don't even want to give that argument the time of the day. And it's not like John Ramsey was watching a bunch of true crime documentaries back then and he knew that he was contained. Maybe I still think, like, I watch a ton of, but if I found someone I love, I would be touching. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
like, I know
I would
that's
give
probably
him a big hug, be like, "Oh my God, are you alive? Like, are you
I
okay?"
would, because you don't know, even if they're still, it's
Mhm.
like, even if they're not breathing, did you stop breathing 5 seconds ago?
Yeah,
Or 5 minutes ago?
even in
You know?
movies, I feel like that you don't see movies where they're like, "Oh, let's not touch her." Like, you don't think about
You
that.
don't
That's
do,
not where your mind goes when
no,
you see
your mind
your
is
dead
not
child.
thinking through preserving evidence when
Yeah.
it's your child.
That's not your top priority at that moment.
So when Fleet White was later not investigated, when Fleet White was questioned about the discovery of the body later on, he told the investigators that John had exclaimed, "Oh my God," before he even turned on the light. Now, if you remember, Fleet had previously gone downstairs and opened that door to that room. He couldn't find the light switch. And he thought he didn't see anything because it was so dark in there. He saw nothing. So he just closed it. He's like, "Oh, there's nothing in here."
Yeah.
So he tells investigators, he makes it a point to say, John said, "Oh my God," before he turned that light on. And in his opinion, like, he's saying, I couldn't see anything there before that light was on.
Yeah.
And this is something he stands by. Like, he insists that it was too dark to even see the form of the blanket on the ground with the light off. And this is John's, like, very close friend saying this.
Yeah, I don't think he would lie about it.
We're going to go deep into Fleet White, probably not this first episode, but, like, later on. Fleet White, I think that Fleet White, I don't know this, he's never said this.
He's suspicious.
I think Fleet White thinks that John had something to do with this.
I feel like just by that statement, like just by him saying that, yeah, he said, "Oh my God," before he even turned the light on. And I already went down there and didn't see anything.
Either he thinks that John had something to do with this, or he had something to do with this and he's trying to point at John.
Yeah.
It is, and that's all conjecture and I know nothing. But that's the impression I get. And we're going to talk a lot more about Fleet White later on in some of the subsequent episodes. Now, officers actually tried to they recreated this later on and put something in the middle of the room where they say that her body was discovered. They turn off the lights and they all say that none of them could see anything without the light on. They're like, there's no way you could see.
But like, they couldn't even see like a blob because, like, I mean, you know your house, he knew the suitcase wasn't supposed to be there. Maybe he saw this blanket and it was like, well, that's not supposed to be there.
This is one of those things where I feel like I can't really have an opinion unless I could see it with my own eyes. Because I get that they're saying this, but you'll see the police are very, very against the Ramseys. So
Yeah,
it's like,
very.
How are they feeling when they recreated this? I want to see it with my own eyes personally, because like if you have the light on in the hallway, even if there's no windows in the room and you're in the basement, you have the light on in the hallway. When you open the door, I feel like it's got to light up a decent portion of the room. And this room doesn't look that big. So I don't know, like the room we're sitting in now, for sure, you would see something in the middle of the floor. But I could also see if it's not your house, maybe you don't realize that it's weird. There's something in the middle of the floor. You think it's like a pile of laundry or something. And so it doesn't immediately click in your mind that it's out of place.
But also, she was covered, right? Like, unless like a body part was sticking out that you could see.
Her upper body was covered. I think her legs were out.
Okay, well then maybe.
Again, there's no photo. We're just going off like what John
hearsay,
say. So there's no photos of this, but I read that her upper body was covered by the blanket.
Okay, well then that makes more sense because I'm like picturing just like a blob on the floor, and for him to just, if it was just out of place, if the argument was that,
know.
Yeah, but like also my first reaction wouldn't be, "Oh my God." My first reaction would be like, "Oh, that's not supposed to be there. Like let's go see what that is." I'd be like, move the blanket.
But if you're looking for I don't know. The whole thing's weird. This whole thing is weird. The fact that that the police didn't find her and the father did, that's weird.
And the fact that they, from oh my God, I can't talk. What time was the 911 call made? Like, when did they find
before 6 a.m.
6 a.m. And then they didn't find her until
7 hours later.
7 hours later.
7 hours later.
And this is when Arndt was in. First of all,
there were multiple different officers in the house.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Point.
Like, how the fuck did not anybody but I don't know. I got questions.
It's just the thing is like, this is a really mess. I'm not even trying to make a joke. It is going to be kind of funny. I'm not even trying to be an asshole and like joke about horrible things happening, but I have to say this. Please imagine that let's say the parents did do this and they're just fucking waiting for these officers to find her, and they keep going in the basement and no one's finding her. Can you imagine? Like, I wonder like what was going through their if they did this, which we have no idea. I'm not insinuating. Statistically, most likely, but I'm not insinuating anything. Imagine what was going through their fucking heads while they're waiting for for her to be found by the police.
Yeah, like John and Patsy are just looking at each other like, dude, that's like the third person that's gone downstairs and they still haven't found her.
They're looking at each other. Can you believe these fucking idiots?
Like,
what?
It's not funny.
And then finally, John, I could see how people are arguing this. They're like, well, John just finally was like, I gotta go find.
Literally. Because I mean, that's what it seems like, to be honest.
Imagine
it's a good
the
argument.
Anxiety of waiting for them to find. So I don't know. Like, again, I'm not insinuating that that's what happened or whatever, but like,
it makes sense.
It's just like they must have been sitting there like these fucking idiots.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I don't mean to make jokes about it, but I just had that thought. I had to share it. So John picks up and now I'm going back into something so sad. But John picks up JonBenét and he's yelling, "My angel, my angel." And according to Arndt, as soon as she saw John carrying JonBenét up the last few steps from the basement, she says that it was evident that she was, quote, clearly dead, and she's been dead for a while, end quote. I think she's referring to the fact that her body was stiff.
Yeah.
She told ABC that in that moment, she felt like all of the little oddities that she had been noticing all morning, quote, instantly made sense, end quote. She immediately ordered John to put JonBenét down. Arndt says, quote, I knelt next to her and I leaned down to her face, and John leaned down opposite me, and his face was just inches from mine. And we had a nonverbal exchange that I will never forget. And he asked if she was dead. And I said, yes, she's dead. And I told him to go back to the room and to dial 911. And as we looked at each other, I remember I wore a shoulder holster. And I remember tucking my gun right next to me and consciously counting, okay, I've got 18 bullets, end quote. When the interviewer asked Arndt why she did that, why were you counting these bullets? She replies, quote, because I didn't know if we'd all be alive when everyone showed up. I said it. Everything made sense in that instant. And I knew what happened, end quote. The interviewer then asks Arndt if she was afraid because she thought the killer was still in the house, to which she responded, oh, I knew it. Arndt then picked up JonBenét's body again and moved her to the living room.
Why?
Because she doesn't know what she's doing.
That's what I'm
Sorry,
saying.
Linda Arndt.
This lady is a basket case, in my opinion.
I almost feel bad for her because she never should have been put in this. She's not a homicide detective.
Like,
she's never worked a homicide case before. Like, she's a detective, but I don't know what she was detecting, burglaries or something.
And she had already stated that she felt like uncomfortable and like she was being,
like
what's the word I'm looking for?
She was outnumbered.
And she felt like pressurized by John and Patsy in the first place. So,
right.
like, obviously, I'm sure that's probably going to make her feel some type of way already.
But I just like, I don't understand this. Why you would pick her up again? Why you would?
Yeah,
and you've been in the house for hours, so you might have stuff on you. You've been in the house since 8 a.m. because she got there after the first police officers. She got there around 8. So you've been in the house for like 4 or 5 hours now, and you might have stuff on you that you're going to transfer to her. Like, you should have just, I know it's sad, and
what
I
is
know
the
you don't
reason for her moving her into the living room?
I think that they,
like,
this is the other thing is, in my mind, I could see the reason for her moving into the living room is like, she's trying to place her somewhere like with a little bit of dignity where the family can gather and like peaceful, and not just like leaving her at the top of the stairs. But at the same time, it's like, well, you're saying in that moment you knew that it was John Ramsey. That's what she's implying. She doesn't actually say John Ramsey's name, but she's like, I knew that, the killer was in the house, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So
she heavily implies it was John.
If you're then in that case, it doesn't make sense that you're like moving her to to not upset the family and put her in a more like peace. I don't know. It's just weird. Not saying that I don't think she did it on purpose. I'm just saying she shouldn't have been in this position, but also it's true that she fucked it up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Linda Arndt picks up JonBenét. She moves her into the other room, and Patsy comes into the room, and she knew, because she could hear what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So she could barely even walk into this room. And basically the other people were almost like carrying her, like dragging her into this room. And she immediately just like laid on top of JonBenét's body, hugging her, just sobbing and screaming. And people say this is what she was saying. Quote, Jesus, you raised Lazarus. Sorry, I was not built for this sentence. She said, quote, Jesus, you raised Lazarus from the dead. Please raise my baby, end quote. And if she has nothing to do with this, and if they have nothing, how fucking sad.
Yeah.
How sad. And that's the thing, the way people talk about this case. And I understand, like, statistically and just based on what happened in the case, it is statistically most likely that the parents had something to do with this. And like what I always say in the episodes is usually the correct answer is the one that takes the least amount of assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that of it being the family takes less assumptions than assuming it's some intruder and they
some
got,
random person that they don't know.
And there's all this reasoning for all this weird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
However, we don't know for sure. And even if you feel pretty certain that the family was involved, you don't know that for sure. So I think it's okay to have that discussion. Like, let's be in the real world. Have that discussion, but like, don't. I'm going to talk about some of the shit that the people did to the Ramseys that is so fucking horrific if they had nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's just one of those things that when you hear that sentence, you're like, it reminds you, like, even if it's a very small chance that they had nothing to do with this, and if they had nothing to do with this, this is fucking horrific. And what the world has done to them since then is absolutely horrible and unimaginable. And they're probably the only people who have ever experienced that to that level in the entire world. Now, in the same ABC interview, like I said, Arndt says she's sure that she knows who killed JonBenét, but she refuses to say a name. The impression that the interview gave me, though, is that she thinks John Ramsey is the killer. Again, I don't know that for sure. I can't put words in her mouth. That's just my impression. But she also says in the interview that she doesn't think the killer will ever be charged for the crime. And I hate to say it, but I agree.
Yeah, I would
with
have
her.
to agree. But also, she can't say anything because she has no evidence that John did it. If she is pointing to him, she couldn't. I mean, I don't know.
Because the crime scene was not controlled.
Exactly.
Now, because John removed the cord and the tape from the body and carried her upstairs, like we said, all of this physical evidence is contaminated.
Mhm.
So investigators were really hoping that the autopsy would provide them with something useful. The official cause of death was listed as, quote, asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma, end quote.
Gave me a headache just
Do you
fucking
like
thinking
how
about
I
it.
did not mess that up once?
Yeah, that was nice.
Thank you.
I'm not even surprised anymore because you're doing a great job.
Thank you. So what this basically means in real people terms is that she had been killed by strangulation and a skull fracture. But it is unclear which came first or if they happened simultaneously. But the coroner basically said that they happened at least so close to each other, or at least so close to being simultaneous, that there was no way of telling which came first. So there are a lot of people that argue that the hit on the head came 45 minutes before the cord was wrapped around her neck.
Mm-hmm.
And according to the autopsy report, not possible. Not possible. They're saying that they happened very, very close to each other.
Yeah.
Within minutes.
I was going to say,
they
they'd
can't
be able
even
to tell if it was 45 minutes before she was strangled.
Now, the fracture to her head was 8.5 inches long. That's huge, especially compared to a 6-year-old's head. Like that, it's from the top to the bottom of her skull, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
At the top, there's a squarish, rectangular-ish, not
trapezoid
perfect thing that was broken out of the skull, and then there's a crack that goes up and down.
Oh, so
that is 8.5 inches long. So it's big. And if you look at it, a lot of people say that she might have been hit with this flashlight, which we're going to get into in later episodes. I do think the flashlight looks like it would fit this. It just from looking at it with my eyes as someone who doesn't know anything about autopsies or skull fractures. But it makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, here's the interesting thing about this. And this becomes important when we get to the theories. So you want to pay attention to this part. Like I said, we don't know which came first. However, there was petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes, showing that she was alive when she was strangled. So a lot of people, like the Burke theory, they say Burke hit her with the flashlight, killed her, and then the parents wrapped the rope around her neck to cover it up. Impossible, because she was alive when she was strangled.
Yeah.
Now, what I did read was that there was evidence of strangulation from the outside of her neck. There was trauma to the outside of her neck. However, there was no trauma like to her trachea and vocal cords and everything inside the neck. So even though she was being strangled, it doesn't seem like she was being strangled hard. And it doesn't seem like that would have caused her death. Actually, that couldn't have caused her death. The reason that they say that the cause of death was listed as asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma is because when that trauma is to the head and then you're also traumatizing the neck like that and making it difficult to breathe, obviously that's going to, I hate to say it this bluntly, but it's going to make you die faster.
Yeah.
And the point is that without that skull fracture, that the pressure that was going around her neck alone wouldn't have killed her unless they increased the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So still, the main point, because this is going to be very important when we get to the theories, is that she was alive when that was around her neck. Now, the cord, like I said, was also deeply embedded into her neck. And so a lot of people say, well, was this bloating after death or was it swelling? From what I've read, no one really knows. It's all conjecture. Some people say one side, some people say the other. But the fact that the strangulation was done so lightly is what a lot of people point to as like they think it was more of a sexual act as opposed to like trying to kill her. It was like some sort of autoerotic asphyxiation of some sort. Now, no semen was found on the body and there wasn't any conclusive evidence of rape. However, sexual assault was not ruled out definitively because there was some evidence of a vaginal injury, and there were actually microscopic fibers that matched the paintbrush handle that was used for the garrote. So this paintbrush, spoiler alert, another piece of this exact paintbrush was found in Patsy's art supplies kit.
So another thing from the house.
Right. So there is a third of it, or there's one piece of it in the art supplies kit. There's one piece of it used for the garrote, and there is a third piece of it that is missing. It was never found. And there were microscopic fibers from this paintbrush handle found in her vagina. So this indicated that she was sexually assaulted with the paintbrush handle. Now, a lot of people, going back to the theory, say the parents did this trying to cover up for Burke to make it look like she was raped, not realizing that there would be fibers left over, whatever.
That is so fucked up.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah,
I feel like that's
way
if you
too
are saying
far.
that Burke, this was an accident, the parents were just trying to cover for Burke.
To cover it up would be putting the noose around her neck. And putting duct tape on her mouth. That would be covering it up. But to go as far as...
Why would they even have to put a noose around her neck? Why not just write the ransom note and be like, we have no idea what happened.
Yeah.
Someone hit her on the head.
Yeah, but even... I'm saying, like, if they were to go to that length, like, duct tape and rope is one thing. But, like, to fucking sexually assault your child with a paintbrush,
death,
a broken paintbrush, that's...
And imagine being... And again, this all goes back to... If they didn't do this, and I know some people are like, impossible, but for the people who are like, I'm pretty sure they did it, but I'm not 100%. On that 5% chance that they didn't do this, imagine the fucking horror of someone coming into your house, murdering and sexually assaulting your child, and then they accuse you of doing that to her.
And something so horrific, like the way she was murdered.
It's just horrible. And again, maybe they did do this to her. And in that case, we should lay into them. But it's just like, we don't know. So the pathologist also noted in the autopsy report that it appeared that her vaginal area had been wiped with a cloth, which to me shows someone's trying to like clean up evidence or something. The report also mentioned that her underwear was stained with urine, as well as, quote, several red areas of staining measuring up to a ½ inch, end quote. Another very odd thing noted was that the underwear that she was wearing was a size 12 underwear, meaning it was made for like a 12-year-old child and would have been way too big for 6-year-old JonBenét. We're going to come back to this because we got to sum it up because we're 2 hours in. That is something that has never been explained to my satisfaction. Why the fuck she was wearing 12-year-old sized underwear.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know that there was like evidence of like wiping either. That's weird.
Right. And they just said it appeared that her vaginal area had been wiped with a cloth. I don't know what that means, appeared. Like, if you could see it in color or if there was chemical, I don't know. And I know people are screaming right now for me to talk about the DNA evidence. We're not going to get into it in this episode because obviously some of the DNA comes from the clothing and stuff I'm talking about now. We will get into that though. Don't worry. There was also some evidence that suggested that some of the vaginal trauma had happened 7 to 10 days before her death, but it was inconclusive. So this is very...
How do you find that? That's a very big egg to drop.
Especially when they're saying there was vaginal trauma from the paintbrush.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I read in a source, we're going to get into it in a later episode, and I'll say which source, I can't remember off the top of my head, that this vaginal trauma that they believe was caused by the paintbrush, they say that it's clear that she was alive when this happened.
How do they know that?
I'm assuming blood. Because that's the only thing I can think, if there's bleeding, that the heart is still pumping. But they didn't say that. And that's where this case is so hard to discern the facts, because one source says one thing and it is a credible source. Another source says the exact opposite and it is also a credible source. It's like when you hear these expert testimonies, they'll say the two opposite things. And so I'm going to tell you everything that I read, and I'm going to tell you when it's like, well, two people are saying the exact opposite, and I don't know what's right.
We're just supplying you a boatload of facts, so
for you to do with what you will. But this also goes, okay, so they also say that there was possible vaginal trauma that may have happened 7 to 10 days before her death, but this is inconclusive. So the police go to her pediatrician, and the pediatrician says, no, there was I never saw any signs of physical, sexual, or emotional abuse in the Ramsey household or during exams of JonBenét.
How do you just... Oh, it looks like 14 days ago there were signs of sex.
I would assume that it's based on the healing stage, but I don't know what vaginal trauma looks like. You know, I'm assuming that's like microscopic. I hope.
Yeah.
But I would assume it's by the healing stage, but I don't know. Now, I also think it is relevant to note that it's well documented that JonBenét had a lot of issues with wetting the bed. So you could look at this two ways. Some people say that maybe the vaginal trauma is from like the tired parents cleaning her up like too harshly.
True.
The other people say that bedwetting is a major red flag for victims of sexual assault. Or childhood trauma. Childhood trauma, I should say. Both are true, but we don't know. So I feel like it can hint towards either or both or neither. We don't know. So, but I wanted to mention it because I knew some people are going to be like, you didn't bring up the bedwetting. And we'll talk more about it. Don't worry. Now, her stomach contents revealed pieces of pineapple. Or they say fruit that resembled pineapple, whatever. They think it's
yellow
pineapple.
chunks.
And this pineapple was not fully digested, which suggested that she had eaten the pineapple within hours of her death. Now, we all know this is going to become a very contentious point during the investigation, and we are going to get into it in a later episode. Lastly, in the palm of her left hand, there was a heart drawn in red ink, just like a little kid would. And that is where we are going to leave it for today.
Dude, I'm on the edge of my fucking seat.
Because we're literally 2 hours and 7 minutes in. I'm sure we'll cut a little bit, but
I'm over here twitching. I got so many fucking questions. I'm ready.
We're literally, I feel like we're going to end up with 10 hours of episodes on the JonBenét case. And I promise you guys, I don't know when we're releasing all this. We both work for full-time jobs. This is going to be 2 hours of episodes is probably 6 to 8 hours of editing time. Like, literally by the time it comes out, because we've listened to every episode, like I probably hear every episode 5 or 6 times before it comes out.
Same.
So just know we're doing our best. If it ends up being more than 3 parts, we'll drop bonus episodes because I really don't want to spend more than 3 weeks on this.
Yeah.
But I'm a gabber. I got a lot to say.
We're yappas.
So court is adjourned because I'm exhausted.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.